Tarek's command reverberated through the ship like a death sentence. As the crew scrambled to obey, I found myself frozen at my station, my mind racing through the possibilities. Every instinct screamed that we should have taken the chance to negotiate, to learn more about these humans before engaging them. But here we were, charging headlong into a confrontation we knew so little about. "Shields up! Prepare the weapons array!" Valir barked, her voice taut with stress. The display in front of her lit up, showing the positioning of our fleet. We had the numbers. Our ships were larger, more heavily armed. But the humans, their smaller vessels, were already darting into formation, moving with unnerving coordination. Tarek stood at the center of the command deck, arms crossed, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. It was as if he thrived on this, the tension, the threat of violence. There was a strange excitement in him, a perverse fascination with the impending chaos. "They'll come for us first, strike fast, try to overwhelm our defenses," Tarek said, almost to himself. "But they're predictable. They always underestimate us." I wasn't so sure. As the human ships began their advance, I felt the knot of dread in my stomach tighten. These weren't just random ships flying into battle, this was a predator's calculated approach, and we were the prey. "Commander," I said, stepping forward, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, "are you sure we should engage them directly? What if they—" "Enough, Kessin," Tarek cut me off, not even glancing in my direction. "Humans are reckless. They thrive on chaos, but we control the battlefield here. Let them come. We will crush them." I bit my lip, forcing back the urge to argue. Something felt off. The humans weren't acting like the stories I had heard, brutal, chaotic, aggressive. No, there was a method to their movements, something far more dangerous than raw strength. The first human ship broke from their formation, darting toward our fleet like a predator stalking its prey. It was small, almost insignificant compared to the hulking dreadnoughts we commanded, but it moved with an unnerving speed, weaving through the void with deadly precision. "Fire on that ship!" Valir shouted, her hands flying across the console. Our forward batteries unleashed a volley of plasma fire, searing through the blackness of space toward the oncoming vessel. For a moment, it looked like we had them, until the ship veered sharply, dodging the attack with ease. "What the—" Valir cursed under her breath. "They're too fast." Tarek's expression didn't falter. "Focus on their flanks. They leave gaps when they move like that. Exploit them." I scanned the display, searching for the openings Tarek was talking about. Sure enough, there were small windows, tiny vulnerabilities in the human formation that only someone like Tarek would notice. He had spent cycles studying them, learning their tactics. This was his obsession, his passion, and now that knowledge was paying off. Our ships adjusted, launching another barrage of plasma fire toward the weak points in the human formation. This time, a smaller vessel exploded in a brilliant flash, debris scattering into the void. The command center erupted in cheers, a brief surge of hope flooding through the crew. But it was short-lived. The humans retaliated swiftly, their ships darting between ours with an almost predatory grace. They didn't rely on brute force like we did, they used speed and precision, picking apart our defenses with surgical strikes. One of our cruisers took a direct hit, its shields flickering before collapsing entirely. "Commander, we're losing ships faster than we can defend." Valir shouted, her voice strained. "They're outmaneuvering us." Tarek's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. "Hold the line. We still have the advantage in firepower." I wasn't so sure. The humans weren't just fighting, they were playing with us, exploiting every weakness, every hesitation. It was as if they knew exactly how we would respond, like they had been preparing for this moment for cycles. Then, something unexpected happened. The human ships stopped their advance, falling back into a loose formation just outside our firing range. "Why are they pulling back?" Valir asked, bewildered. They had the advantage. "They're not retreating," Tarek said quietly, his eyes narrowing. "They're planning something." He was right. The humans weren't falling back out of fear, they were regrouping, preparing for something bigger. The tension in the command center thickened as we waited, the anticipation gnawing at my nerves. This wasn't like any battle we had fought before. The humans weren't interested in a simple skirmish, they were playing a long game, and we were barely keeping up. "They're waiting for us to break," I muttered, the realization settling in. "They're testing us." "Good," Tarek growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Let them. If they want to test our resolve, we'll show them just how hard we can hit." Valir's eyes widened. "Commander, if we push too hard, we'll leave ourselves exposed. We need to." "Enough, Valir," Tarek snapped, his eyes flashing with that perverse gleam again. "Divert all power to the forward batteries. We're going to hit them with everything we've got." "But sir." "Do it." The command center buzzed with frantic energy as Valir relayed the order. I felt the hum of the ship's systems surge as power was siphoned from the non-essential functions, all of it diverted to the weapons. The lights dimmed slightly, a reminder of how much was at stake. "We'll only get one good shot," Valir warned, her hands flying across the console. "If this doesn't work..." "It will work," Tarek said, his voice cold and sure. "Target their command ship. We'll cripple them in one blow." The targeting lock slid into place, and for a moment, the entire ship seemed to hold its breath. This was it, our last gamble. If we missed, there wouldn't be enough power left to defend ourselves from the human retaliation. "Fire," Tarek ordered, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The ship shuddered as every forward battery unleashed a torrent of plasma, streaking across the void toward the human command ship. It was a sight to behold, the raw power of our fleet focused into a single, devastating strike. But just as the plasma barrage neared the human vessel, something unexpected happened. Their entire fleet shifted, as if they had anticipated the strike. A wave of bright energy radiated from the command ship, and suddenly, the plasma dissolved into nothing, absorbed by an invisible field. "They neutralized it," Valir whispered, her voice hollow with disbelief. "How is that possible?" Tarek's eyes darkened, his claws digging into the armrests of his chair. "They've been studying us," he muttered, his voice low and dangerous. "They knew exactly what we'd try." Before anyone could respond, the humans moved as one, their ships swarming toward us with terrifying speed. One by one, our vessels fell, their systems overwhelmed by the precision strikes of the human fleet. I gripped the edge of my console, trying to steady myself as the ship shook violently from another direct hit. The cold realization settled in, Tarek had underestimated them. The humans weren't just fighters. They were hunters. And we were their prey. The command center rocked again as another barrage from the human ships slammed into our defenses. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the acrid scent of burning wires filled the air. The crew was shouting over one another, scrambling to keep control of what little remained of our fleet. Panic was starting to set in, creeping across their faces like a plague. And why wouldn't it? The humans had taken apart our defenses, piece by piece, with a cold, calculated efficiency. "They're circling us," Valir cried, her eyes wide with fear. "We can't outmaneuver them. Shields down to 15%. Tarek's calm exterior was starting to crack. His claws tapped against the armrests, a nervous tick he rarely showed. He glanced at the tactical display, where the human ships had formed a tight, unbreakable perimeter around our remaining vessels. "They're toying with us," I said, my voice trembling. "They know we're beaten, but they're drawing it out." Tarek's gaze hardened, but the defiant gleam in his eyes was gone. He had prided himself on understanding human behavior, on predicting their movements. But this was beyond anything he had anticipated. The humans weren't simply fighting a battle. They were making a point, showing us that no matter how prepared we thought we were, we would always be several steps behind. "Commander," Valir whispered, "what do we do?" For a long moment, Tarek didn't respond. He stared at the tactical display, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he rose from his chair. The room went quiet, the frantic energy dying as every set of eyes turned toward him. "We surrender," he said, his voice low but clear. The words hit the crew like a physical blow. Valir's mouth opened in shock, her fingers frozen over her console. "Sir, surrender?" Tarek nodded grimly, his gaze never leaving the screen. "They've beaten us. There's no point in sacrificing more lives. We've lost." A silence settled over the command center, broken only by the distant sound of alarms and the hum of the ship's failing systems. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tarek, the unyielding, the relentless, the one who had never backed down from a fight, was admitting defeat. I wanted to protest, to argue that we still had a chance, that we could outlast them. But deep down, I knew he was right. The humans had dismantled us with precision, with strategy. This wasn't a battle we could win through brute force or sheer numbers. Tarek tapped a few commands into the console, opening a channel to the human fleet. His voice, when he spoke, was steady but resigned. "This is Commander Tarek of the Zirek Dominion. We surrender. Cease your attack." For a moment, there was no response. Then, the screen flickered, and Captain Alistair Dren appeared once again, his face unreadable. He studied Tarek for a long moment before nodding slightly. "A wise decision, Commander. Stand by for boarding." The transmission cut off, and the weight of those words, boarding, settled heavily in the air. The humans were coming, and there was nothing we could do to stop them. "Prepare for their arrival," Tarek ordered, his voice devoid of its usual fire. "No resistance. We've lost enough today." Valir's hands trembled as she relayed the command. Around the room, the crew looked stunned, disbelieving. The idea of surrender was anathema to everything we stood for. But what other choice did we have? I stood there, watching the display as the human ships moved in closer, their smaller vessels detaching and making their way toward us. There was no escaping this. "Tarek," I said softly, stepping forward, "you did everything you could." He glanced at me, his eyes dark, haunted. "Did I, Kessin? Or was I too arrogant to see the truth? That they were always going to win?" I didn't know how to answer that. Maybe he had been too proud, too confident in his understanding of the humans. But who could have predicted this? That they wouldn't just defeat us, but dismantle us completely? The humans' boarding ships latched onto our vessel with a series of dull thuds, and the lights in the command center dimmed even further. The end was here. Tarek stood tall, straightening his uniform, as if preparing for a final stand. The rest of us watched in silence, uncertain of what came next. The doors slid open with a hiss, and a team of human soldiers marched in, their weapons at the ready. At their head was Captain Dren. He stepped forward, his eyes sweeping across the room, taking in the scene of our defeat. His expression was calm, but there was no mistaking the power he wielded in that moment. He was the hunter, and we were his prey. Tarek stepped forward to meet him, his gaze unwavering. "It seems," he said slowly, "that we've underestimated you, Captain." Dren nodded slightly, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That much is clear, Commander. But you made the right choice in the end." Tarek's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What was there left to say? Dren turned to his soldiers, giving a brief nod. "Secure the ship. No violence unless absolutely necessary." The soldiers moved quickly, taking control of the command center with a practiced efficiency. I watched them, feeling a strange mixture of fear and awe. These were the humans we had spent cycles fearing, the species we had dismissed as chaotic and reckless. But now, standing in their presence, I realized how wrong we had been. They weren't just another warrior race. They were something far more dangerous, something we had never truly understood until it was too late. Dren turned back to Tarek, his expression softening slightly. "I don't take pleasure in this, Commander. But your people have been hiding for too long. It was only a matter of time before you were found." Tarek's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Perhaps. But we won't forget this." Dren nodded, his eyes gleaming. "I don't expect you to. But remember, this was not about conquest. This was about survival. For both of us." With that, He turned and marched out of the command center, his soldiers following close behind. The weight of his words lingered long after he was gone. Tarek stood there, staring at the empty doorway, his expression unreadable. I wondered what was going through his mind, whether he was plotting revenge, or simply mourning the loss of his pride, his fleet, his people. But in that moment, all I could think about was how close we had come to total destruction. The humans had found us. And in doing so, they had shown us just how far behind we truly were. The war we had feared was over before it had even begun. And we had lost. The end. They didn't explode like I thought they would. That was the first thing Commander Tarek said as the radar lit up with the unmistakable signatures of human ships. Everyone in the command center froze. Tarek's nonchalant tone clashed with the rising tension. His silvered horns gleamed in the low lights, his alien features unreadable. For an instant, silence thickened in the air. The humans had found them. "Are you certain it's them, Commander?" said Valir, the ship's tactical officer, her green eyes wide with alarm. Her pale skin flushed darker as she glanced at the incoming fleet. "They're already moving into formation. I thought we had more time." Commander Tarek leaned forward, his claws tapping rhythmically against the armrest of his command chair. "Humans are never late, Valir. They just arrive when they're ready." He turned, eyes narrowing at the shimmering display of sleek human warships. "The question is, are we ready?" I stood to the side, trying to make sense of the sight. Hundreds of angular, deadly ships emerged from the darkness of space, moving with frightening precision. I had heard of human fleets in training. Stories of their ruthlessness, of their reliance on swift, smaller vessels capable of outmaneuvering our larger, more fortified dreadnoughts. But seeing them now, en masse, was something else entirely. "They're bound to find us sooner or later," Tarek said, his voice smooth but edged with something unspoken. "But, sir, we've been hiding here for cycles." I blurted, my voice shaking with disbelief. "How could they possibly know?" Tarek cut me off with a raised claw, a slight smirk curling at the corner of his lips. "Because, Kessin," he began, "humans are curious creatures. Once they catch a scent of something unusual, they hunt it down like it's their last breath." There was something about the way he said it that chilled me. Tarek had always had a strange fascination with humans, studying their rapid rise through the galactic hierarchy. He often spoke of them with an almost perverse admiration. I turned my attention back to the approaching fleet, my heart pounding. The human ships were smaller, sleeker than ours. Where our vessels were massive fortresses in space, theirs seemed almost fragile in comparison. But there was a fluidity in their movements, like predators circling prey. "What are your orders, Commander?" Valir's voice trembled slightly. Tarek chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Let's see what they want first." He flicked his wrist, and a hail pinged across the command center. The human flagship was requesting communication. Valir swallowed hard as the screen flickered. A human officer appeared, flanked by two other soldiers. He was unimpressive at first glance, short, rugged, with a calculating gleam in his eyes. But something about the way he carried himself radiated danger. "Greetings," the human said, his tone polite yet dripping with unspoken threat. "I am Captain Alistair Dren of the Terran Vanguard. It seems we've stumbled upon something interesting." Tarek leaned forward, his lips curling back to reveal sharp, white teeth. "Interesting? What could you possibly find interesting about a remote sector like this?" Dren didn't miss a beat. "Let's not play games, Commander. We've been tracking your activity. Hiding, aren't you? And now that we've found you," he paused, his eyes narrowing. "Well, we're curious about what exactly you're trying to keep from the rest of the galaxy." The room held its breath. I could feel the tension, a palpable wave of unease settling over us. Tarek's smirk faded, replaced by a hardened expression I had only seen once before, the day he destroyed an entire cruiser of rebels without so much as a second thought. "Curiosity killed the careful," Tarek hissed. But Dren wasn't intimidated. "Perhaps, Commander. But curiosity also has its rewards. Are you going to force our hand, or can we talk? The silence stretched painfully long. Finally, Tarek chuckled, but it was devoid of humor. You found us, Captain. Now what? Dren's eyes flashed with something cold. Now we decide if this encounter ends peacefully, or if it becomes something far worse. The room was deathly quiet. Tarek's fingers twitched. His gaze swept the command center, as if weighing his options. For a moment, I thought he might agree to negotiate, to actually take the diplomatic route. But when he finally spoke again, his voice carried that dangerous edge that always signaled something reckless. We're not the ones who should be worried, Captain. And with that, Tarek severed the communication link, turning to Valir. Ready our ships. But sir, Valir stammered. No more hiding. The humans have found us, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. The command center buzzed with frenetic energy as everyone scrambled into action. My pulse raced as I watched the human fleet inch closer, their weapons undoubtedly armed and ready. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a nightmare. And something about the predatory way they moved told me we were about to learn just how dangerous humans truly were.